Welcome everyone to another one of Power Technology Research webinar, this time focusing on national hydrogen strategies around the world, in different regions around the world. I am Hassan Zahir, the Chief Commercial Officer at PTR. I will be the moderator for the session today. With me, I have Zishan Khan, who's the Senior Analyst for Hydrogen and Rotating Machines at Power Technology Research. Along with Zishan, we also have Jannat Wasif with us. She's also an analyst focusing on hydrogen and rotating machine as a topic in Zishan's team. One small housekeeping item, that is everyone's microphone is on mute, like the guys who are joining the webinar as attendees, but that doesn't mean that you cannot ask the questions. Please feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat option, and then we'll make sure that we answer those questions in the Q&A session towards the end. So with that said, I would like to start with a brief introduction of Power Technology Research as a company for those of you who do not already know. So Power Technology Research is a specialized market research firm providing qualitative and quantitative research to customers on the energy transition equipment and software markets, specifically focusing on power grid and technologies on the new energy side. Our customers are clients across the energy sector's value chain, from manufacturers to end customers to investment banks, and then also consulting companies who are looking into this sector. And they're usually leveraging our data for their strategic decision-making processes, from business development and expansion to product development, for example, and product roadmaps. In terms of specific topics, we cover everything in the energy transition space, from equipment in the power grid side, like from transformers and switchgear and flexible AC transmission systems, to looking at electric vehicles and electric vehicle chargers, looking at energy storage, value chain, hydrogen in the power sector, around which we have today's webinar as well, looking at port electrification, for example, and the impact of different things against each other, how the whole ecosystem evolves as we move towards clean energy transition. With that said, jumping into today's topic, hydrogen has been a very hot topic for the last couple of years. The fact that it's one of the most abundant elements in the world, combined with the fact that when it gets combusted, there is no CO2 emissions, makes it a very attractive or like very good candidate to consider when we talk about overall different fuels for energy transition. And due to this reason, governments around the world have put together strategies to see how they can capitalize on supplying this as a resource, or actually using this into different applications as a resource as well. EU alone is betting on hydrogen heavily, having it as part of the Green Deal at $550 billion investment. So today, in today's call, we will try to encapsulate different hydrogen strategies around the world, starting with a quick global overview. We'll jump into Asia Pacific. From Asia Pacific, we'll move into Africa, Middle East, and then talk about what's happening on the Americas side. After all of this, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end, and that's why I said in the start, please feel free to post questions over there, and then we'll try to answer them live in the call, and whatever questions are left, and of course we can answer them afterwards as well on an individual basis. So that's basically the agenda for today. With that said, over to you, Zishan, to please share your screen and start the presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Hassan, for a very good introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar on regional insights on national hydrogen strategies. In today's webinar, we will be talking about the national hydrogen strategies for 4 regions that includes APEC, Africa, Europe and Middle East, and Americas. But before moving towards those regional insights, I'll first give you a brief overview of hydrogen. Hydrogen, a promising fuel for the future, is a versatile fuel which represents untapped potential as a clean energy source as it can be produced from a variety of different sources. Hydrogen is an energy vector of the future, but the question is why it has become so important right now. Now, there are three main reasons for that. First one is that it is the most abundant and naturally occurring element in the universe. Second, it is essential in achieving net zero emissions because it will help to decarbonize those hard to abate sectors. And lastly, it has widespread applications in power generation, mobility, ammonia production, methanol production, and iron and steel industries. Now, there are challenges associated with hydrogen to be used as a clean fuel. Currently, the global hydrogen production is around 90 million tons per year, and almost most of it is produced from fossil fuels commonly known as gray hydrogen. The cost of production for the gray hydrogen is less than $2 per kilogram. However, in order to reduce our global carbon footprint, hydrogen should be produced from green sources like renewable energy. But cost of green hydrogen production is very high at the moment, and therefore research, development, and demonstration projects are ongoing to bring down the capital and operational cost of green hydrogen. The next challenge associated with hydrogen is that it has a very low volumetric density as compared to other fuels, although it has a very good energy density per mass. With this low volumetric density, hydrogen production requires advanced storage and compression methods, which further adds to the cost of hydrogen production. Now, to overcome the challenges associated with hydrogen and to better utilize the clean energy sources, leaders around the globe have come up with policy frameworks termed as national hydrogen strategies to promote the development and adoption of hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is a promising fuel for the future, but what are those key factors that instigated and that enables the development of national hydrogen strategies? And as per our analysis, there are mainly four key factors that enables this development of roadmaps and strategies. First, decarbonization, as after the Paris Agreement to combat climate change and global warming, all the governments are focused on reducing their carbon footprint and move towards net zero emissions within their economies. Green hydrogen presents an opportunity to these economies to get rid of hydrocarbons and reduce their global carbon footprint. Secondly, with the establishment of this hydrogen economy, new industries and supply chain will be created, which will consequently create jobs and foster the economic growth. Intermittency and curtailment of the renewable energy is a challenge that is hindering the integration of renewables in the grids, and hydrogen solves this problem as energy can be stored in the form of hydrogen for a long period of time. However, more research, development, and demonstration projects are required to make hydrogen storage more efficient. Lastly, after Russia-Ukraine crisis, energy security has become a top priority of governments as they are more focused on localized energy production. And if it is not possible, they want to energify their energy mix. Now that we have analyzed the energy strategy, the hydrogen production strategies of various countries around the globe, we observe that there are some key tools that the governments have used to establish this hydrogen economy. First one is that they are directly uh, financially supporting the hydrogen economy um, because it is at a very nascent stage, and in order to establish this market, it requires government funding. For example, Japan has committed 1.5 billion US dollars to support zero emission hydrogen production. Similarly, Germany has pledged 7 billion euros to speed up the market rollout of the hydrogen technologies. Another key tool within these strategies is financial incentives. It can be in the form of subsidies or tax credits or increasing the tax on carbon dioxide. Recently, in Inflation Reduction Act in US, they have said $3 per kilogram of tax credit for green hydrogen production. And similarly, Norway plans 5% annual increase in CO2 tax by 2025. Lastly, within these strategies, government has also encouraged public-private partnerships to develop hydrogen market, as public-private partnerships can serve as a platform to fund initiatives and reduce the risk during early deployment and facilitate the transition from demonstration to commercialization. This model has already been successful in the EU through the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking, which helped to demonstrate hydrogen technologies for multiple pathways. Similarly, in the US, the California Fuel Cell Partnership serves as an industry and government collaboration which aimed at expanding the market for fuel cells, electric vehicles powered by hydrogen. Now we will see, as you can see in this slide, that the global hydrogen consumption in 2020 was around 90 million tons per year, and from that 90 million tons, 23.9 million tons hydrogen was consumed in China. Second largest consumer was USA with around 11.3 million tons per year of hydrogen consumption. And lastly, at number third is EU plus UK, which has hydrogen consumption of around 8.6 million tons per year. Now, around 24 national hydrogen strategies have been available around the globe by 24 countries, and 26 national hydrogen strategies are in preparation by different countries, and 35 national hydrogen strategies are at initial policy discussion phase. The, the major hydrogen consumers, just like China and US, have not yet their hydrogen strategy, but in China, 16 provinces and cities have published their 5-year plans that feature hydrogen. Recently, China published their 14-year plan from 2021 to 2035, known as China Long-Term Plan for Hydrogen, in which green hydrogen production in the range of 100,000 to 200,000 tons by 2025 was targeted. Now, if we look at USA, they also don't have any published strategy for hydrogen, but recently two developments have changed the landscape of hydrogen in US. One is the bipartisan infrastructure law, in which 9.5 billion USD was allocated for hydrogen, and from that 9.5 billion USD, around 8 billion was dedicated for hydrogen valleys. Second, the most recent development was this US Inflation Reduction Act, as I've discussed before, which gives tax credits of around $3 per kilogram for low carbon hydrogen production. When we look at Latin America, Chile is leading the hydrogen market, and they were among the first countries to develop their hydrogen strategy, which targets cheapest hydrogen production with around $1.5 per kilogram. And they target to install 25 gigawatt of electrolysis capacity by 2030. So basically, they want to be a global leader in exporting hydrogen. Similarly, the same thing was observed in Australia's hydrogen strategy, which target hydrogen production cost to fall below $2 per kilogram. And also within this strategy, they want to become one of the largest global hydrogen suppliers, just like Chile. When we look at the South Korea, their hydrogen economy roadmap published in 2019 wants to expand consumption from 130,000 tons at present to 5.26 million tons by 2040. In the mobility sector, the target 6.2 million fuel cell electric vehicles and 1,200 hydrogen refueling stations by 2040. When we look at Japan, which is the first country to develop the hydrogen strategy in 2017, they target 3 million tons per year of hydrogen production by 2030 and 20 million tons per year of hydrogen production by 2050. In the mobility sector, they target 5.3 million residential fuel cells and 900 hydrogen refueling stations with around 800K fuel cell electric vehicles. Within EU, European Commission although have their own strategies, targets, and plans, but individually countries have also published their hydrogen strategies. For example, recently UK National Hydrogen Strategy revised its targets in 2022, uh, which 2 gigawatt low carbon hydrogen production was targeted by 2025 and 10 gigawatt by 2030 out of this 10 gigawatt, 5 gigawatt will be entirely green hydrogen. In the France National Hydrogen Strategy published in 2020, 1 to 10 megawatt of power to gas installations by 2023 and 6.5 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2030. Netherlands government strategy on hydrogen published in 2020 targets 500 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2025 and 3 to 4 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2030. When we look at Germany National Hydrogen Strategy published in 2020, it targets 5 gigawatt by 2030. It is divided into two phases. In the first phase, which is till 2023, they want us to start market ramp up and and harness the opportunities after analyzing the hydrogen value chains. And by 2030, which is the phase two, they want to strengthen this market ramp up nationally and internationally. Spain is also a leader in the hydrogen market within EU as they published their Spanish hydrogen roadmap also in 2020, which targets installation of 300 to 600 megawatt electrolyzer plants by 2024. And they also plans to install 4 gigawatt of electrolyzer plants by 2030. So now this was just an bird's eye view of the global hydrogen strategies. Now we will deep dive into the regional strategies published by different countries, and I'll start with the APEC region. Now, as per our analysis, Asia Pacific is the epicenter of the hydrogen movement, and why we say that because it has a tremendous potential to produce low carbon hydrogen. Australia has the greatest hydrogen production potential from low-rank coal and renewables, especially solar. Malaysia has around 65 petajoule of hydrogen production potential from flared gas. China, which is the world's largest producer and consumer of hydrogen, has around 2,900 petajoules of hydrogen production potential from hydropower. Now, when we analyze these national hydrogen strategies in the APEC region, they target certain sectors where hydrogen can be utilized. And this provides market opportunities for the key market players. So the sectors targeted in those industries includes within APEC region includes iron and steel industry, ammonia and methanol production, mobility, refineries, power generation, and heating. Especially in the mobility sector, South Korea, China, and Japan are among top 4 largest markets for fuel cell electric vehicles globally. Now, there are some challenges for hydrogen market to develop. One of them is the high cost of production within these regions. Second is developing new infrastructure around the hydrogen from production to transportation to end use consumption. And lastly, lack of clear application priorities as every country is targeting different priorities as Japan and Korea are going to be the importer of hydrogen and they are targeting mobility sector, whereas Australia is more interested in exporting the hydrogen to these countries. But no certain sectors are targeted within this region. Now, When we discuss about the apex vision of a hydrogen future, according to PTR, the pioneer of hydrogen strategies, Japan, and the surging renewable hub, Australia, are the most notable countries in terms of hydrogen deployment in the Asia continent. Some of the key players within this region is Australia, Japan, China, India, New Zealand, South Korea, and Singapore, who will drive the hydrogen market in the future. If we look closely to the Japan hydrogen strategy, which was the first, as we have discussed before, it was the first country around the globe to publish a national hydrogen strategy in 2017. It targets 3 million tons per year of hydrogen production, which will reduce around 26% of their global greenhouse gas emissions. Further, they target 20 million tons per year of hydrogen production with 80% of which will reduce 80% greenhouse gas emissions for Japan. Then the mobility sector, which is a prime sector for which is the main sector that they are targeting for hydrogen. They have 800,000 fuel cell electric vehicles target, 10,000 forklift targets, 1,200 fuel cell buses targets, and 900 hydrogen refueling station target. When we talk about the power generation sector, they target to use they target to produce hydrogen using at a very low cost of around 17 Japanese yens per kilowatt hour. When we look at the Australian hydrogen strategy, they want to become a hydrogen powerhouse by 2030. Among some of their targets, they want to become one of the top 3 exporters of hydrogen to the Asian markets. They have an investment of around 1.3 billion Australian dollars, and they want to bring the cost of clean hydrogen below 2 Australian dollar per kilogram. Another key fact that will drive the hydrogen market within Australia is that 11% of Australia is suitable for renewable hydrogen production, and this will drive the green hydrogen production, will drive the market, and the hydrogen produced from these renewable sources will be exported throughout the region, especially to Japan and South Korea. Now, we will move towards the Africa, and we will review their national hydrogen strategies. Africa has a huge potential for hydrogen production, but the problem is they have very little infrastructure. When we say that they have a tremendous potential to produce low carbon hydrogen, it can be gauged from the fact that they have around 10 terawatt of solar capacity that can be used to produce green hydrogen in the future. They have a potential of around 110 gigawatts of wind capacity and 10 gigawatts of geothermal capacity and 350 gigawatts of hydropower. And if this energy potential can be harnessed, it can be further used to produce green hydrogen. Now, when we talk about blue and gray hydrogen, this region has around 148.6 trillion cubic meter of gas reserves and 7% of global gas reserves. So if we can capture the carbon dioxide from these fossil fuels and produce blue hydrogen, Africa could become a global leader if they can do that successfully. And when we talk about the market opportunities or the sectors targeted within the strategies published by these African countries, some of the sectors that they specifically target is ammonia production, methanol production, refineries, and the plan is to produce hydrogen within the region and export it to European Union. But again, there are some challenges for Africa because they don't have infrastructure to produce hydrogen, store hydrogen, and or transport hydrogen even within Africa. But they plan to export it to EU, and we have to see how this will work out. Next, the key challenge is that they lack skilled workforce, and the capital is not available for them to invest in the hydrogen market. But we have seen this trend that they are going for bilateral agreements with European countries so that they can invest and install their projects within Africa, and so that they can take hydrogen produced within Africa, which will be cheap hydrogen. Another key achievement for the region is that Mali becomes the first country in the world to produce electricity from natural hydrogen deposits that they have discovered underground. When we look at the African hydrogen game plan, according to PTR, the early mover Morocco and the emerging player Egypt are the most notable countries in terms of hydrogen deployment in the African continent. Some of the key players include Morocco, South Africa, Namibia, Egypt, and Kenya. When we look closely at the Morocco's green hydrogen roadmap, Vision 2050, it it targets 8 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2030, which will reduce 1 million tons of CO2 emissions. By 2040, they target to install 37 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity, which will reduce their carbon emissions by 6 million tons. And by 2040, they target 78 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity, which will reduce their carbon emissions by 11 metric tons. Further, they target 11 kilotons per year of hydrogen production starting from 2025. And also, they want that they should fulfill the global hydrogen demand by 2030 by 4%. Another key player in the region is Egypt, which is an emerging player in the continent. And some of the key highlights of the strategies are that the Egyptian government is expected to announce a 40 billion hydrogen strategy this year. The strategy aims to develop a production capacity of 1400 megawatt by 2030 and 1 gigawatt of liquid organic hydrogen carrier hub in Egypt's East Coast. Currently, 5 green hydrogen projects are under development in Egypt. With this, I will ask Chandra to walk you through the next regions. If you have any questions, you can post it in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zishan, for giving such in-depth knowledge of the strategies of Asian and African countries. And thank you, Hassan, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Now that we have seen the developments in the African and Asian markets, we will move on to Europe, Middle East, and the American regions and see how they're trying to keep up in the hydrogen race. If you look at the global green revolution, Europe seems to be leading the way, with several projects under development that are backed by a huge investment plan and several hydrogen strategies driving the market. European Union came out with its hydrogen strategy in 2020, which is to be adopted by all of the 27 European members. This strategy serves as the basis for the development of individual national strategies of each state, out of which Germany, Netherlands, Hungary, Portugal, France, Spain, Slovakia, and Denmark are some of the members that have set some highly ambitious targets to meet the collective European goal. Around 60 million tons of hydrogen demand is foreseen in Europe by 2050. And to fulfill that demand, European Union aims to boost clean hydrogen production, for which some short and long-term targets have been set. A 6 gigawatt electrolysis capacity is targeted by 2024, which will produce 1 million tons of renewable hydrogen, whereas a 40 gigawatt electrolysis capacity is targeted to be installed by 2030, which will produce around 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen. The vision for 2030 onwards is to deploy renewable hydrogen at a large scale across all hard-to-abate sectors that include the heavy industry and heavy mobility sectors. To support its vision of a climate-neutral Europe, the European Union has launched several plans, crucial among which are the Repower EU plan and the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative. Repower EU aims to produce 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen domestically, along with importing the equal amount by 2030. whereas the EHB initiative sets aside 80 to 143 billion euros for the development of hydrogen infrastructure. That includes constructing 5 pan-European hydrogen supply and import corridors and deploying 53,000 kilometers of hydrogen pipelines by 2040. Another major player in the European continent is the United Kingdom, which has its own ambition for a thriving hydrogen economy. It recognizes hydrogen as a promising solution to achieve its world-leading emission reduction targets for carbon budget 6 and net zero by 2050. UK came out with its hydrogen strategy in 2021 with an initial target of 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production by 2030. This was later on raised to 10 gigawatts, and it was declared that 50% of this production would be entirely green, that is, from renewable energy sources, whereas the other half would be from sources other than renewables. This strategy comes with a 55 million euro investment to convert industrial machinery and 40 million euros to convert heavy machinery to run on hydrogen. It also aims for 20% hydrogen injection in UK's natural gas network. The United Kingdom focuses on low carbon hydrogen, which apart from green also comprises of blue hydrogen. One of the domestic projects that is currently in the limelight is the H2 Teesside project, which is a 1 gigawatt blue hydrogen production facility. The interesting aspect of this project is that it is going to be UK's largest blue hydrogen production facility when it comes into operation in 2030. Now, UK's market may depict a very promising future for hydrogen, but there are still some challenges that the country needs to overcome before it can fully exploit the potential of this clean energy source. These are the high cost associated with clean hydrogen production, the lack of a proper infrastructure along the entire value chain of hydrogen, the unproven viability of green hydrogen production at a large scale, followed by the policy and regulatory uncertainty surrounding the hydrogen market. Overcoming these challenges will play a major role in establishing the country's hydrogen market. Now let's move on to the Middle Eastern region. Although this region lags a little when it comes to strategies and policies related to hydrogen, but there is a huge potential for clean hydrogen production in this region, with Saudi Arabia and UAE leading the region's hydrogen movement. Having a vision to attain a large market share of the blue hydrogen market, Saudi Arabia aims to become the top supplier of hydrogen in the world, with 2.9 million tons of clean hydrogen production planned by 2030 and 4 million tons of clean hydrogen production planned by 2035. Around $36 billion are planned to be invested in hydrogen, with a special focus on hydrogen usage in the mobility sector. One interesting development to see here is the NEOM hydrogen project, which is a 4 gigawatt renewable hydrogen project that aims to produce around 1.2 million tons of hydrogen per year. Once completed, it will be the world's largest renewable hydrogen to ammonia production facility. The UAE is emerging as a key contender in the geopolitical chessboard of hydrogen, as it aims to conquer 25% of the global low-carbon hydrogen market by 2030. It is the first Middle Eastern country that has committed to the net zero emissions target. UAE aims to produce around 500,000 million tons of hydrogen per year, with majority of it going to the export market in order to establish the country as a leading hydrogen exporter to the German, Japanese, and South Korean markets. The country's first green hydrogen project is situated in Dubai's Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park, which is a 1.2 megawatt pilot facility that commissioned last year. Now let's move on to the American region and see how North and South America are trying to keep up with the rest of the world. When we look at the North and South American continents, we see that there is tremendous potential to produce low carbon hydrogen. The world superpower USA alone has 678 million tons of green hydrogen production potential, whereas more than 1,800 gigawatts of renewable energy potential is foreseen in the South American country, Chile. Mexico isn't far behind with 670 megawatts of electrolysis potential if the right policies are implemented in time. USA and Canada are currently leading the blue hydrogen market, making up for more than 80% of the global production capacity. When it comes to market opportunities for hydrogen, the iron and steel industry holds great potential for hydrogen deployment, followed by the petrochemical, mobility, and refinery sectors. Keeping in mind the current Russia Ukraine crisis, making Europe look for alternate partners to replace Russian energy imports, this region holds great potential as an exporter of hydrogen. Apart from this, agriculture is one sector that holds significant opportunities for hydrogen, as farms can produce their own electricity using hydrogen. It can also be used as a fuel to power the agricultural vehicles and to make ammonia fertilizer. Chile is emerging as a key player in this region, as three of Chile's projects, Hydrogen Green, H2V CAP, and Antofagasta Mining Energy Renewable Project, once completed, could double the current global electrolysis capacity. Although this region's hydrogen market depicts a bright future, there are some challenges that this region needs to address. The, these include developing proper legal and regulatory framework and constructing a domestic infrastructure for the transport of hydrogen from its point of production to the point of end use. When we look at the American hydrogen market, Chile and USA are the two countries that are stepping up in the race to hydrogen deployment. Chile came out with its hydrogen strategy in 2020 with a vision to become a clean energy provider for a carbon neutral planet. It aims to install 5 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity by 2025 and establish two hydrogen valleys with a combined 200 kilotons of hydrogen production per year. Furthermore, it aims to install 25 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity by 2030. Chile's hydrogen strategy is a little unique in the sense that this country aims to produce the cheapest green hydrogen on the planet at a price below 1.5 US dollars per kg. The government aims to invest $5 billion in hydrogen market along with $2.5 billion per year specifically for the export of hydrogen, which leads us to conclude that green hydrogen production and hydrogen export are the two sectors being targeted by the government. Although USA does not have a national hydrogen strategy yet, but it does have some huge amounts of investments given out by the government to develop the hydrogen sector. These include $8 billion for developing regional clean hydrogen hubs, $1 billion allocated for the H2 electrolysis program, and $500 million for clean hydrogen manufacturing and recycling. USA currently has an installed electrolysis capacity of 17 megawatts, whereas 1.4 gigawatts of projects are currently in the pipeline, which means that by 2030, around 13.5 gigawatts of green hydrogen projects are expected to be online in the United States of America. Similar to Chile, USA also has set an ambition of lowering down the cost of hydrogen. Termed as the Triple One goal, it aims to bring the cost of hydrogen to $1 per 1 kilogram in 1 decade, which is highly ambitious given the fact that the country does not have an official hydrogen strategy yet. So that was all from my side. If you have any questions, do let us know. We will be glad to answer your queries. I will now hand it over back to Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jannat and Zishan, for your presentation. Very insightful. I already see that we have some questions typed in the chat here. So I guess I I will take them one by one. Please, if like message to any all the attendees, if you have any other questions, please feel free to type those in. We'll make sure that we answer those in the next few minutes here for the Q&A section. All right, starting with the first question from Stefan. In which sectors or applications hydrogen is consumed currently, and which new sectors and applications will consume hydrogen in the coming years? Ishan, Jannat, who would like to take that?
Okay, I think I'm going to answer this question. As I have discussed in my presentation, according to IEA, global hydrogen demand was around 90 million tons per year in 2020, and almost all of this demand came from refining and industrial sectors. In fact, refining and ammonia consumed more than 80% of this demand, and some of the other consumers was methanol and steel production. So this is the outlook of the hydrogen demand in 2020. And on the second part of your question, that moving forward, we think or we expect that mobility sector, especially heavy duty road transport sector, um, will be a new consumer of hydrogen, and some other sectors that may consume hydrogen in the coming years is those hard to abate sectors like steel production, which will be among the biggest consumers of hydrogen in next few years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then moving on to the next question. What is the current outlook of Indian hydrogen market? Are there any specific targets for hydrogen?
Uh, I think I'm going to answer that. On the Indian hydrogen market, although we have seen some movement on the Indian hydrogen market, and it started back in 2021 when in August 2021, Indian Prime Minister announced to make a national hydrogen mission, to make India a global hub for green hydrogen production and export. Later on in COP26 in Glasgow, again, Prime Minister committed to achieve net zero by 2070, and take, I think, so non-fossil fuel generation capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. Recently, I think so in the first half of 2022, they released their first interim hydrogen strategy, which focused on reducing the cost of production of green hydrogen. And the key highlight of this strategy was to waiver interstate transmission charges for 25 years of green hydrogen and ammonia production projects. I think so, if I'm correct, commissioned before 30th June 2025. Uh, they also plans, but basically the main sector, or the main area where they are targeting is ammonia production, as they target to produce 5 million tons of green hydrogen annually by 2030, and basically they want to export the ammonia, and within this strategy they also want to install those export hubs within their ports, where they can store hydrogen or ammonia within their ports. So this is basically the current outlook or the developments in the Indian hydrogen market.
Okay. All right. Then the next question concerning the Africa presentation, why the gas reserves are still relevant in producing hydrogen if the goal is to decarbonize the economy and avoid the consumption of non-renewable resources?
Mhm. Okay, basically, we have seen a lot of discussion around green hydrogen, but in the transition, blue hydrogen will also come in play, and we cannot just rule out the importance of blue hydrogen. So the continent like Africa, who wants to earn some capital through exporting hydrogen, they want to utilize their natural resources, and by basically the target is to use their natural reserves like gas to produce hydrogen or maybe ammonia and export it to European Union where the demand is. Now I understand that the decarbonization is at the forefront for the developed nations, but for the developing nations, they want to utilize their natural resources first, and this can be done through carbon capture and utilization. That if you capture the carbon emissions through CCUS technologies, then you can make it somehow less carbon intensive for the environment. We have seen that recently Saudi Arabia shipped its first shipment of ammonia produced from blue hydrogen, which is and shipped it to Japan. So these countries will move towards green hydrogen, but in the transition, blue hydrogen will come into play and help this transition towards green hydrogen.
All right. While we're staying on the topic of blue versus green hydrogen, there's a question which says, how does the cost of producing blue hydrogen compare to the green hydrogen?
Yes, I'd like to answer that. So,
Mhm.
blue hydrogen is actually cheaper to produce than green hydrogen because, on average, green hydrogen is 2 to 3 times more expensive than blue hydrogen because the cost of renewables, particularly solar and wind, and the cost of electrolyzer is high. So, right now, green hydrogen production is expensive as compared to blue, but moving forward, it is expected that the price will lower down as countries have set some highly ambitious targets for lowering down the cost.
Mhm. Okay. Um, and then next question from Perry. Apart from strategies at the national level, do countries have a regional or state level roadmap or strategies for hydrogen too?
Yeah, so I'd like to answer that. So,
Mhm.
yes, there are some countries that have state or provincial level strategies apart from the strategies at the national level. So, if you take the example of Europe, where the European Union has published a hydrogen strategy for all of the 27 member states to follow, and then some of the member states have come up with their own strategies that correspond to the collective European goal. So, similar to that, there are some countries that, apart from the strategy at national level, also have provincial or state level strategies. For example, in Canada, Alberta has published its own hydrogen roadmap that is in line with the national targets. Similarly, there's British Columbia, Quebec, and Ontario. All of these have their own hydrogen strategies. Similarly, if you look at Australia, there is a national strategy that the government has published, but if you dig deeply, you'll find that New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia, and Tasmania, they have their separate strategies. Similarly, when we look at Germany, there's a region, North Rhine-Westphalia, that has its own strategy. So some countries do have strategies at national and provincial levels.
Okay, perfect. Then we have another question from Javier, which is literally the billion-dollar question on everyone's mind. What is the real potential role of hydrogen in our energy mix? Several challenges have been raised: cost, explosive reactivity, legal reindustrialization. Under what circumstances could hydrogen serve as a foundational aspect of a truly carbon-free economy? How does it compare to Japan's recent return to nuclear? Is the general optimism justified? Maybe I can quickly comment on that, and then maybe Jishan and Janet, if you want to add something to it. I mean, this is the billion-dollar question today. How we see it is that it's an interesting bet to have, and it will vary from application to application. We cannot have a general statement where we can say that, yes, hydrogen will be the answer for everything as it is out there today being talked about everywhere, right? Like it seems like hydrogen is being pushed everywhere as a possible solution. However, that is not going to be the case. There is going to be sectors where clearly hydrogen would be significantly more expensive, even with carbon taxes and carbon pricing on top implemented. But there would be sectors where hydrogen might still make more sense. For example, on the power sector, where you have more kind of centralized, concentrated generation. I think one of the other aspects where hydrogen could emerge, and we're talking now 10-year time frames or even longer, where hydrogen could emerge as a very interesting carbon-free alternative would be when we talk about hydrogen valleys, right? At one location and avoid the cost of having the expensive networks being set up throughout the countries or the regions and having the high cost of transporting the hydrogen, and then it might still be more economical to have it. So, like to summarize the answer, it really depends on the case to case basis, depending on the application you're thinking about when we talk about our end customer lens.
Mhm.
Maybe Zishan, Janet, if you want to add
Yes.
something to it.
Yes, and on the last part of the question, that Japan's recent turn to the nuclear, even though currently the countries are more focused on their energy security, but as we have analyzed the Japanese hydrogen strategy, they have set a goal of 1% hydrogen in their generation mix by 2030. So in the short term, there are some apprehensions, but as part of their long term strategies, they want to include hydrogen in their energy mix. So things will change as we move forward in the coming years. And this transition, we are very optimistic that some part of this transition will come true along with the electrification, especially in those hard to abate sectors where electrification will not come into play.
Okay, then the next question, has the slide sharing for the ongoing event already been discussed? It has not been discussed, but in general, the slides and the recording for today's session will be available in a couple of weeks from now. Everyone who registered would receive an email as well. Generally, we upload the recording on YouTube and then also the presentation that are available on the same registration link. But you'll receive an email from our side when they're ready and they're online for you to download. Then the question from you as well, how does your evaluation of public funding initiatives in the Middle East, African and Middle East, South American market look like? Maybe Jishan, if you want to quickly answer that.
Yes, as I have on. Okay,
Or,
Janet, go ahead.
sorry,
Yeah,
Janet, please
I'll
go ahead.
answer that. So yes, funding is available in huge amounts, as I discussed in the Middle Eastern region, as Zishan discussed in the African region, and I'll give you an example. For example, Colombia has set aside an amount of $2.5 billion. Similarly, Chile is going to invest $50 million in hydrogen. So fundings are available. It's just a matter of time to see how the market will turn out.
And just to add on that, we see a lot of funding, not just from the developed nations, from the developing nations, as Janet mentioned about Colombia, but in the developed nations like European Union has set aside great funding. You can see in the US in the Inflation Reduction Act and earlier in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, they have set aside $9.5 billion for the hydrogen market and especially $8 billion for hydrogen valleys. And Japan, as I've discussed before, has set aside $1.5 billion for hydrogen technologies. And similarly in Germany, around $7 billion is set aside as part of the strategy. So public funding is available, but there, as I've discussed in my presentation earlier, that there are other key tools that they have used within these strategies, just like the public funding is one part. Second is encouraging public-private partnerships and some financial incentives, just like subsidies, like tax credits, or increasing the tax on the CO2 emissions. So everything is part of the strategies that will uptake the market in the coming years.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Um, I see that we have reached the end of the questions for today as well. With that, I would like to thank you guys once again, Jishan and Jannat, for a very good presentation and very informative one. And also, I would like to thank all the attendees for being here with us for this hour. Thank you so much for your time and attention on this webinar. If you have any questions that come up post-webinar as well, please feel free to drop any one of us an email and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Have a nice rest of your day. And yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.